Can you say more about what the journey was from there?
Yeah. So from there, I basically, I'm skipping over some stuff, but I basically had a baby, and everything got really obvious, um, as to what exactly my worries were, and it became very specific. I was very worried that he would get sick. In fact, I mean, I was still worried in general. Yeah, I remember coming home from the hospital and just wanting to drop him off at daycare the next day, like at 2 days old, just because I felt, so extremely unprepared and scared of just anything that could happen to this human life. And it was very probably hormonal as well. But the worry was pretty extreme. And then my kid got his first stomach bug at like 9 months old, and I just had like a breakdown. I absolutely lost it. I just thought that I thought it was, in a way, it was the end of the world. I realized that he is capable of being sick, and it could happen again at any time, and I can't prevent it, or maybe I can, and I should really think about ways to prevent it. Maybe I have like a lot of work to do, and I should pull him out of daycare and quit my job and protect him from ever getting sick. And or if I don't, then all I have to look forward to is uncertainty and sickness happening in life as a matter of course. So I realized that something was wrong. So I sought a help with a postpartum kind of specializer counselor. So she was my next.
And what about the possibility of him being sick and you being unable to protect him? What about that made your world come crashing down?
I mean, I don't know. I think that's the OCD and the trauma, right? That's just how it felt. And my husband was pretty. I mean, he had by then he had known me, and I'd had similar reactions to him over the years at certain points if he got sick, where my worry just far exceeded the 24 hours that my husband was ill. My worry would go on for months and months, or a year later, I would remember, oh, it's been a year. Remember when you got food poisoning or whatever? Just almost like I was having more traumas, re-traumatizing myself or something. So he knew that was my tendency, but this time was so much different because we had a child and everything was more extreme. And yeah.
And when you're saying got sick, that's kind of a euphemism for a number of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So do you, is the word that's typically used when referring to getting sick, is that a trigger for you? Is it difficult to say those words?
It has been. It's gotten less difficult over the past couple of years.
And are you willing to let me use those words right now?
Yeah.
So you're talking about your son vomiting,
Yeah.
specifically vomiting. And
Yeah.
can you say my son might vomit?
Yeah.
Are you willing to say that now?
Yeah. That my son vomited.
So, and your fear is that your son might vomit?
Yeah. Or I'm afraid that I might throw up, or my husband might throw up, or my son might throw up.
And what
Or
about like,
really anybody that I care about or that's in close proximity to me, if I care about them. And it's not the vomit itself that gets me like this. I mean, it probably used to be, but I've had incidental exposure over the years. Like I got a small dog a few years ago, and um, she is a puker. She's just very pukely. And I didn't used to be able to even say the word puke. So she's done a lot for me in terms of exposure. Like, she threw up in the middle of the night last night on our bed, and we just went back to sleep.
great
So
job.
she's done a lot for me. So I know like that's like a little microcosm of like, it gives me hope, right?
Good. Yeah. Really good perspective on that, rather than that type of exposure and any reactions that you have to it, meaning that you're going to suffer forever. If it switches over to, this is an example, this is an exposure, and it gives me hope that I can respond effectively, like responding effectively to it gives me hope. That's a really great shift in attitude.
Yeah, it's definitely a metaphor that helps when I remember it, when I remember to think about it. Because it's hard not to be hopeless. And then, if I do think about that, I think, oh, I am capable of, shifting the way I think towards this. When I first got her, and she was like my first baby, and I felt all the similar feelings that I felt when I had my human baby, of responsibility and worry and decision making, and like, how much vomiting is too much, and at what point do I make the decision to go to the vet in the middle of the night or go back to sleep? Is somebody going to die? Is my little tiny dog who relies on me to keep her safe, is she going to die? What am I going to make the right decision? So that journey was similar to the one that I started when I had my human baby.
All of that is really well said. Thank you for describing that. Do you want to go back to, like, once your human baby was born, what happened when you sought out a specialist?
Yeah, so she again had a lot of compassion, and a lot of knowledge in terms of, like, what women typically deal with after they have a baby, and kind of the postpartum OCD, postpartum anxiety. Although she did not speak to me about OCD, I still didn't realize that I had it. Um, and this is getting pretty close to the present, but what she did with me without my knowing was EMDR. And the reason that I didn't know that that's what it was is because she wasn't putting her finger in front of my face and having my eyes move. She had like a different just method. She had me holding clickers, and I didn't know that's what she was doing until I talked to her about it afterwards. So EMDR to, I guess, tackle the trauma of my mom being sick when I was younger. Um, and it didn't help at all. I saw her every week for almost a year, I think a year. And just, I felt just as desperate and sad and scared as I did the day I first saw her.
And specifically worried that your son was going to get sick?
Yeah, I remember one time in her office saying, like, her trying to understand exactly what was making me cry in that particular moment. And I think what I said was, he could be incubating a stomach flu bug right now as we speak. My husband's at home watching him. I'm here with you in this office, and it could be living inside him right now. And it could be, tonight he could pop, spike a fever, and tomorrow he could be throwing up, and the next day we could all be throwing up. And I just had so much fear. And she was surprised by that explanation, but like, it didn't really go anywhere. And I think I got to the point at the end of that year where I was so desperate. I told her, I think it's a metaphobia, and I think I need to go see an exposure therapist. I am so desperate. I'll do anything at this point. I just don't want to feel this particular fear all day, every day. It's ruining my life. And she worried about that because she said, I don't feel like you're resourced enough. I mean, at the time I was sleep deprived and that kind of thing. And she said, exposure therapists are pretty rough and tough, and not necessarily care about like the trauma that you've had or where you're coming from. It's mostly just start changing your behavior today if you want to get over it. And she was a little bit worried about me, and I said, no, I'm that's fine. I think this is what I need to do.
And what happened from there?
Well, I saw the only exposure therapist that I could afford at the time, and it was a disaster. And I still to this day don't know whether it was her or me, but she was a student, and it was a really, really bad fit. It led me to have like one of my first panic attacks ever. And at first I thought I was willing, although I didn't know that I was supposed to be willing. I thought I was just kind of do the exposures, watch videos of people throwing up, go eat at a restaurant where you feel like you might get food poisoning, that kind of thing. I even went on a roller coaster, and that was my own idea. I was like trying to be creative. but I didn't really do any, no one really prepared me for what exposure was. I'd never heard the term ERP. I still didn't identify myself as an OCD person. And so I really didn't understand that it, the kind of, what did you call it? Willing acceptance that you have to go in with it or anything like that. So I tried some things. I tried to be creative. I tried to like kind of not cut corners, but jump ahead in the process just to get it over with, which is why I went on a roller coaster, and I definitely white knuckled that the whole time. And afterwards, I did not feel proud of myself at all. And then it got to the point where I showed up for a session, and she said, "Okay, I want you to pretend like you're throwing up into this trash can right in front of me. Do it." And for me, I was embarrassed in an acting sort of way. Like that didn't trigger my emetophobia; it triggered my shyness or something, and I really didn't want to do it. And she said, "Okay, fine, then you're never going to get better." And I just cried and cried until the hour was over, and then I went home and I never saw her again.
That's a really sad story.
Yeah, and I know that it's like, I'm sure she could have, probably treated me with a little bit of the compassion that I had found in my last two therapists. But also part of it was surely me. I know that I was, not understanding, maybe not willing enough, and maybe a little stubborn.
Well, it also sounds like you didn't have appropriate psychoeducation about what was happening. So
Absolutely.
even now you understand that you were white knuckling and that well, first off, it sounds from what the work that we'll do and talk about here, it sounds like you weren't targeting the right fear.
Right.
That you didn't actually suffer from emetophobia. So from the beginning, that's what made the exposure challenging. But the next thing is you then weren't educated around what it means to do exposure. And then from there, it was seen as like if you weren't willing to do exposure, then you were just being resistant rather than understanding that that might not have been the appropriate exposure for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I could have really used some education for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that we're all just kind of, floundering about until we find the right, education or knowledge or somebody to guide us.